Hi everyone! Today we are going to be doing episode 4 of Watch with Maya, and in this session we will be watching the police interview of Tamara Demko, which she was a mutual friend of Dan Markel and Wendy Adelson, and this interview took place on July 19th, which was the day that Dan Markel passed away, just one day after he was shot in his garage on the 18th. As many of you know, Dan was critically injured and he passed away overnight at the hospital. So Tamara Demko is a Harvard Law School graduate. She attended law school with Dan, actually. That's how they met. That's how they know each other. She knew both Dan and Wendy personally and was well aware of their intense, acrimonious divorce. She was aware of the nature of the relationship, right? Despite that, she remained friends with both of them and stayed in touch with both of them up until the murder. And of course, like I said, this is taking place on July 19th. So just the day after he was shot, she's already going for a police interview. So this is my first time watching the interview as well. I'm learning about the case right from the beginning alongside you. That's what these Watch with Maya episodes are for. So let's take another look at this moment. I'm going to share the video now with you, and if you've already seen it, then I guess you can have fun watching again. Okay, let me share my screen.
And you went to law school, you met Danny at Harvard Law School. You were elected to posts for leadership purposes, and you've kept in touch with him throughout this time.
Yes.
All right, I'll let you, just wanted to make sure I'm up to speed on where we're at, and that you has been in Tallahassee, what did you say, 12 years?
7.
7, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And did you go to their wedding?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I was hanging out with them up here before the wedding, but I didn't actually go to their wedding.
Oh, the wedding wasn't here? Okay. Go ahead, feel free.
Danny, so Wendy was going through this process, and the time before she left him, she finished writing her book. And I noticed when she gave me a copy of the book before she left him that she didn't put that she was married. She listed her kids, but she didn't, and I kind of was like, interesting.
She didn't list Danny?
No, not to my recollection. There was something that stood out about her dedication to me, or the author lives here with her 2 sons.
Okay.
And so that was a little odd. But again, this was a few years ago at this point. It was 2012. So 2012, I'd started a doctoral program at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was traveling with the class to London, and I happened to fly back through Toronto. And since Danny's family has a place in Toronto, Wendy had sent out a birthday invitation to all of Danny's friends and said, hey, for Danny's 40th, can you all make a video? Take a picture of yourself doing something, wishing Danny happy birthday. And she sent this out months earlier, like everything was fine between them. So I took a little video of myself in Toronto, and that never happened. The party never happened. Right around his birthday, she called me up, and I knew Danny was traveling, and she said, I have left him. And she moved everything out of the house, and she left him. What I didn't know at the time is that she hadn't told him where she was going. And she kept this from him for a couple of weeks. He was going crazy. He was heartbroken. I was trying to be friendly with her. I didn't know what to think about what she'd said, that he was kind of being psychologically abusive. He's older than she is, so I think she felt that as a power play based on what she'd said to me. And I was in a position where I felt inclined to try to believe her. So she went and she got her place on Aqua Ridge, and I went and visited her just to see if she's okay. Took my boys over there, see her settle in. Not knowing that she was keeping the location at the time.
Not knowing what?
That she had been keeping the location from Danny
Okay,
at the time.
okay.
she didn't handle it well at all. Like it was probably the nastiest divorce I've ever seen. It was nasty. Danny went into this deep depression, and we spent a lot of time. Eventually, I talked to him. He told me, he's like, I don't understand. I'll be better. I'll be a better husband. I won't nag her so much about cooking or cleaning, and he just kept beating himself up about it for a long time. We had a lot of very personal, intimate discussions over the course of a year, I guess.
You and Danny.
And Danny, yeah. And I was talking to Wendy, but Danny kept claiming that Wendy was a little unstable and that she was very flaky. And I was kind of, but she ended up being like that, in that she would make plans and she'd cancel them suddenly, or she'd forget about them, and she'd do that with friends as well. But it became a hard line. They would call it, you're either Team Danny or Team Wendy. And they would actively refer to this. Danny
People that are associated with all.
And Danny himself and Wendy herself, they would say Team Danny and Team Wendy. It was kind of unnerving, actually. And I was like, I don't want to pick a team. I've become friends with her too. But he was a wreck. And she didn't want to live in Tallahassee. She hated being here. She was a more of a DC girl or Miami, and I found out over time that she actually grew up several blocks over from me in Coral Springs, which is where I moved to when I was 12. She was a few years younger, so I never really met her in high school or anything like that. But her parents still lived there at the time. I think they've since relocated, I don't know. But I went and met her family there. When they were married, I saw them both there when they were first having their babies and such. And so I'd go and visit them, whether it was here or whether it was down there. When she left, it was a family effort. Like, parents came up, helped her move, helped conceal everything, get that going. Danny was like beside himself. When she didn't want to move, when she wanted to move, he tried to make it so that she couldn't. And this began a really ugly portion of the legal battle.
Move where?
She wanted to move back to South Florida to be closer to her parents.
After the divorce?
Yes.
Okay.
And he said, I love my kids too much. No way in hell I'm going to fight you. And he was able to get an injunction so she couldn't move. So she was stuck here. She was also under consideration for a professor track at FSU College of Law. And starting at some point, I don't even remember when, it's been 3 years or so, I guest lecture for her in her class every semester. I just did a few weeks ago, which I'll come back to. Please remind me to come back to that, because she said some things to me.
Okay.
The legal battle was very ugly. She felt trapped. I started trying to not talk to both of them about the legal stuff because I felt kind of caught in the middle. And she thought, there's no way they can force me to stay here. And he's like, there's no way, I'm not going to have access to my kids. She was getting a hefty sum of money from him. There were some things that he was, even last month, was upset about. She had his uncle's ring, something along those lines, that she had taken, and it was like a family heirloom that she wouldn't give back. And she had taken whatever she wanted out of the house at the time.
Because he was out of town. Is that what I understood?
So he had to refurnish, and he's like, I spent $10,000 refurnishing this place, and it was a big adjustment, and he didn't know what he had done wrong. Having talked to Wendy, there was nothing he could do right. And she just didn't love him.
Okay.
And it was not something I could say to him. Over time, I've tried to get there, but she just didn't love him that way. And I think she was young, and he was, he was a scholar and the type of guy that her parents would want, and I think she even knew as she was getting married that it wasn't right.
That's what you referred to earlier about her having cold feet?
Yes. She had cold feet. We went for a walk within a month before her wedding, and we went to McClay and walked around, and she's just like, I don't know if I can marry him. And I was like, well, if you don't know, then you shouldn't. And still did. So I think the kids kept them occupied for a little while. But
well, I'm trying to think that they were married in 2006, I believe.
Mm-hmm, sounds right.
And they didn't have children right away.
No, okay. No. She had been, I believe, July 2009, and then Lincoln came a couple years after. So more recently, he had dated a couple people here and there. He was just trying to get his legs under him again. He would often go to Maya and Alex Greenberg's house. They were sort of his surrogate family to get him through this time. And I'd pop over and we'd have drinks and talk, and we'd have these long discussions about lots of different things.
Are they attorneys also?
No, they said today that they weren't. Maya is a dentist. I don't know what Alex does.
Okay.
But I had met them over the course of time.
In Georgia?
They were in Georgia, but I met them in Tallahassee.
Okay.
And I'd met them at some Jewish thingy. But I often would meet him at Jewish festivals and things like that. We'd get our kids together at the park just down the street from his house. And we'd often go to dinner, just talked. He started dating Amy, and we'd still go out. And he always, he'd be like flirting with her and talking to me, and then he'd try to tease her, and he'd turn around and he'd be like, hey, FaceTime, and he'd show me, Amy on FaceTime. And Wendy was just kind of absent. I don't know if she figured I became Team Danny in her mind, but she still would call me up just randomly and say, hey, can you guest lecture for me now? And I'm sure. She had gotten kind of flaky. And over time, I think Danny was able to tell people in a way that they started seeing that she was acting inconsistent. And so I think she felt that. Recently, they kept changing attorneys over and over and over again. And I'll at some point pull up a list because we had a conversation that's still on my Facebook messages about attorneys because I was looking for one. I have since worked things out with my ex, but just verbally. But at the time I was looking for one, so he was telling me who was good and who he had, but they were constantly switching. So he was blocking the attorneys that she had. She was blocking the attorneys that he had because there was some conflict of interest. And it was spiraling to the point where it was like, was there anyone that could represent either of them in town?
Okay, you mean post-divorce litigation? Post-divorce
litigation, even a couple of months ago. So he took me out for my birthday last month. My birthday is June 3rd. He took me out June 4th. We went out for Thai food. And, he told me that he was really infatuated with Amy and that, he's the only dad I've ever met who would go to his kids' preschool daily just to have snack with them. I mean, he loved them that much. But he was telling me that it was getting really ugly again and that he was going to kind of go to the mattresses with her. And there was a bunch of weird, there's just things that don't feel right to me. And that's why I'm really glad that you would have me come in, having me come in today. So after my birthday, we still talked on the phone, I believe, but I didn't physically see him afterward, I don't think. Wendy, I guess, lectured for after my birthday, so after that. And I talked to her, and she told me that she was dating someone. And I said, oh, and I thought it was new. It wasn't new. She'd been dating this guy since September. social worker who was a professor in social work at FSU, and she was all excited about him, and he wants to get serious, and she's not sure, but she really likes him, and everything's good, and maybe we should double date sometime, because I had started dating someone in the interim. So, Danny and I were both talking about the current people we were dating, like, we'll see how it works out, but he wanted to get a movie afterwards. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't, we'll do it next time. Just never next time. So he had started consulting, and I didn't know much about what he was doing. He was kind of excited about it. I knew he wasn't the lead, and I don't think he felt it was dangerous. When I found out, and I guess this is going backwards so I can understand my thought process on it too, because it's more instinctive right now and that's bothering me. I found out, I was at work at Tax Watch when this happened. I had no idea it happened. It pains me that I was like down the road when this happened. I found it because a law school classmate sent me an email and said, I just saw, oh my God, are you okay? Because my entire class knows that we're close. They knew we were close. And that's how I found out. And I was not doing well with it. And I got upset for the first hour. I called John Beeman and said, what the hell happened? He couldn't tell me much, but there was this suggestion that maybe it was a known entity. And before we even got to him saying that, I was thinking about the relationship with Wendy, and it just didn't feel good. It did not feel good. And got off the phone with him, and I found Amy's number, and I talked to Amy for a long time. And I talked to his other friends, Maya and Alex, and then I felt like, and so Amy said to me, if someone intentionally killed Danny, if I go down there, what if they try to hurt me? Because she was feeling like something was off too. And I said, well, I have a concealed carry, I'll take it with me, just come, you can stay at my place, I'll pick you up. So I got off the phone with her, and I realized I didn't have my clip. I haven't found my clip for like 2 months. I had no idea where it went. Yeah. So I went to Kevin's, and it was like I have like a cheap Kel-Tec 9 and like a novice. I only got it after the other stuff. So I went to Kevin's. They didn't have those clips. They're gonna order them for me. But I ended up buying one yesterday. I bought a 40 yesterday, and I went and just I'm like, okay, I get that for tomorrow in case she needs protection or whatever. And at that point I couldn't help myself. I'm like, I have to know. And I drove straight to Wendy's. At that point I couldn't help myself. I'm like, I have to know. And I drove straight to Wendy's. And when I got there, it didn't make me feel better. And I hate saying it, I do, because I feel disloyal somehow. But I got there, she had her friend Janine, who I hadn't really heard about before, and Janine's husband, I guess. I can't remember his name, something short and interesting. But she opened the door, and she looked fairly calm, and she hugged me. I didn't say a word, and she just said, I'm so sorry, to me, because she knows how close we were. And then it was odd, because it felt like Janine was playing bodyguard and being very, and like, who is this Janine person? Her mom came out, I hugged her mom. The boys were running around like nothing was going wrong. And I was so glad, I just had to see them. Like, I wanted to be near some part of Danny. And I asked the mom, like, how did you find out? She said, we're in Miami. Wendy called from the police station. We drove all night. And she seemed appropriately, like, upset. Then her dad, who I've met half a dozen times, Coral Springs, up here, he gave me this look, and I don't know what my facial reaction was to it, but I'm almost positive it was one of suspicion and anger, because he can't even look me in the face today. And it was awkward, and it never had been before. That really bothered me.
Is it common for him to look you in the face? I mean, some people just don't do it.
No, I'm not like an Asperger's kid. No, he was, yeah, absolutely. At least when someone's talking generally, you're listening, looking. No, it was odd.
He recognized you. There
Of
was no
course,
question
he's
of
like,
that.
TJ, hey. Yeah.
But he would not look you in the eye.
He started off fine. And then when we locked eyes, it was like something transpired that didn't sit well with either one of us, I guess. And then today he would not even look at me. I found that to be very unsettling.
And this would be Wendy's father.
Yes.
Harvey?
Mm-hmm. Harvey. Charlie was supposed to come up, her younger brother, but he didn't. That was also strange because she was positive he was coming and then he wasn't. I drove then to his house, to Danny's house, and sat outside and prayed.
From Wendy's?
From Wendy's.
And this was yesterday?
This was yesterday.
Okay.
And just sat there and prayed and said, from here, nothing looks different. It looks like he'll be home any moment. And then went to church and prayed for an hour, ran into my priest, talked to him for another hour, and I haven't slept since. So, I didn't know where he had been shot until this morning. That was extremely hard to hear.
Who told you?
Maya.
What'd she tell you?
She said that he was shot in the face, and that the only thing visible was his chin, and that his brain was mostly gone. And then there were all sorts of rumors swirling.
But that's not true. I mean, I don't know where that's coming from. That's not completely accurate.
Okay.
I'm sorry to have to, I mean.
No, just.
But I don't know. I can't correct that, what has been already told to you specifically, but unfortunately these things get all blown out of proportion.
Yeah. Let me continue talking.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like
I'm
we're
sorry.
done. Like,
I'm
you
sorry.
can tell me what you're able to tell me,
Go ahead.
and I'd love to hear. I don't think that any one of them physically pulled the trigger. I think it is extremely odd that Janine all of a sudden is tagging on. I found it extremely odd that Wendy's boyfriend that she was so excited about a few weeks ago was not there. When I was leaving, I said, well, where's your new guy? Shouldn't he be here to comfort you? And she's like, there's no new guy. And I was like, that's interesting timing. There's just a lot of interesting timings that don't feel right here. And and Wendy's gone through a lot. She's gone through a lot with this. So it could just be that she's grieving, and I hope that that's the case. But I wouldn't put it past her father or even her brother to do something that she might not even be aware of.
You talking about this Charlie?
Charlie, maybe. Charlie really cares about her and hated Danny for stuff. But her dad, I mean, there was a lot of animosity. I don't know whether she told them that he had been abusive or what. I don't know. But I hope that's not the case. I just, everything I've heard does not feel random at all to me. And it feels incredibly intentional based on talking to Amy. She talked to him the night before, and he usually sleeps in bed with the kids. And there were nights when I would go over and we'd sing lullabies to the kids to put them to sleep. And he dropped them off at Creative, and Amy figured he was coming or going from the gym because that was the routine. But it sounds like someone knew the routine.
going from the creative preschool to the gym to home?
I don't know which order that was. I don't know.
He had the kids the night before?
He had the kids the night before, according to Amy.
Okay.
And the last time they texted was something like 12:30. One of them said that they were going to be, tired, going to sleep. I think she said she was tired and she was going to sleep. And they didn't, they didn't talk that morning.
Okay.
And then she couldn't get a hold of him for the rest of the day, obviously. He was finally feeling happy again. He was feeling hopeful. Things with his kids were great. Wendy was this huge elephant in his life for him. I mean, it was consuming. Not that he was obsessed about it, it just he wanted it to end. And it just seemed like it was never going to end. The latest claim was that she had concealed $500,000 in assets, on top of having the family heirloom and other things that he felt were unreasonable. And he had claimed to Maya and to Alex, apparently, that there was something that big that he was going to drop a bomb on her in the next week. A legal bomb that would discredit her statements, particularly with regard to financial matters. Again, the timing of all of it doesn't sit well with me. I have been trying to gauge Wendy's family's reactions to things because I've been around them, and even when she first left him, I mean, I went over to her house. Her parents were staying there. I had a drink with her mom. Like I've seen them and how they react to things, and something feels off. And it could just be, I hope it is, because I don't want Ben and Lincoln to grow up with, really orphaned. And if it does have to do with that family, I hope Wendy had nothing to do with it and is triply devastated that something was related. But I don't know. I don't know about the consulting. Maybe there was some risk, but my understanding was that he was not lead, which shouldn't have made him a target like that. It was fairly recent, and it seems like it would take some time for someone to establish his patterns. It just seems known. The outpouring of messages I've gotten from his students, from my classmates, from my friends, is all past and present. He was a great criminal law professor. Students liked him. I don't think it was some strung out student who didn't like their grade. That doesn't feel right to me either. If it was some weird tangential thing related to consulting, I suppose that's a possibility, but that still doesn't feel quite right. It just feels very personal. It feels very personal. And I want to give benefit of the doubt, but on some gut level, I have this anger that's there. And he didn't deserve this. But no, there was never it wasn't just that she was treating him poorly like in a typical situation. There's strangeness about it. Either because she was changing stories or she was being incredibly evasive. And it really bothered him. But I tried to not let it bother my friendship with her and tried to keep them separated, which is not many of the friends did that. People were like Team Danny or Team Wendy. I tried to straddle both. I was probably the only person who was able to straddle both. And it would break my heart. Which is actually already broken, so I guess I can't fall too much further. He was going to give a presentation at Rutgers. He was supposed to fly in last night to New York, so they're having a memorial for him there. And I'm so full of memories, I'm just in utter disbelief. I'm almost positive at some point we discussed him having a will. I don't know when in this time frame it was at all. But I feel like he has one. No idea where. He was willing to pacify Wendy for a long time. He wanted to get back together with her. He offered, I'll change, we'll get back together, and the important things of the family. She wouldn't have it. And so every time, it was the type of thing where if he was going to have an extended period of time away, he would give her right of first refusal. She never returned the favor. If it was only for a little night, and she's like, okay, well, do it, and she would generally not accept. But she absolutely would never return the favor, even if it meant people coming from South Florida to come and watch the kids. That really bothered him. But the dance that they did was very painful to everyone around them, because it was just nasty. And even on days when she had them, he would go to the preschool just so he could see them and spend time with them. He referred to himself as Abba in Jewish tradition, and he really wanted them to be raised Orthodox. And this was a huge bone of contention between the two of them. They agreed on it when they got married. And then over time, she made it fairly clear that she was not into that. So for the first year after the kids were born, first year or two, they did the ritual, they sang songs, they were teaching them the songs, everything seemed good. And then she just didn't want to go to temple with him, and sort of declined. And then they were actively fighting post-divorce as to what the upbringing would be. And she didn't want them growing up in some kind of Orthodox way. Absolutely not. And she knew that was his heart. So there was never going to be peace about that. Everyone knows, and I've heard people in town write me when I haven't even commented to them, saying, I just heard this is domestic. Have you heard anything? And I'm like, I'm not discussing this. But Wendy has all clear, she can move wherever she wants, all that kind of stuff. I don't think she would hurt her children that way. I want to believe that. I could see her getting overwhelmed enough with the situation to complain to someone who would want to make it go away. And I also feel it's weird that her social worker boyfriend, poof, so suddenly after just bragging about him so recently.
When was that? What was the latest time that she was talking about you?
Okay, let me figure out when I guest lectured. I had dinner with Danny on the 4th. I guest lectured on June 17th.
That's the one that you wanted to refer to later, that you asked me to remind you about?
Yes, so she was bragging about him, she really liked him, and she sent me messages. My messages are going so far back at this point. Let me pull it up.
When you're guest lecturing, she's not there.
We talked before.
Okay.
There's Danny's message. So hers must be on the 17th. Here it is.
Now this is you. What time is the class in the morning? And then after that you said 10 to 12:30 or earlier. The blue is you.
Yes, the blue is me.
Okay. And then June 17th at 8:50 a.m. 10, please. I have to run today after class, but can we set up a date so I can thank you and take you to lunch, please? You said, sounds good. This is all referring to the class that day. Sometime after the class at 147. She says, "You are brilliant and beautiful and amazing. Many thanks for teaching class today." And then you said, "Let's do a double date." I'm sorry, she said,
She said, "Let's do a double
sorry.
date."
Yeah.
Okay, so she said, "Let's do a double." I didn't respond to that because that felt weird to me.
Right. But she's referring to the
She's
social
referring to
worker.
the social worker boyfriend.
Do you know his name?
They were Facebook friends. I don't know if they still are. She had his picture up. They've been dating since September, she told me. Dan knew about him. He mentioned him to me when we went to dinner the week before, or a couple weeks before. And his take was kind of like, well, if she's happy, why isn't she just, getting on with her life? He apparently went poof shortly thereafter. That's less than a month. I guess my question to that would be, he's a social worker. If he wasn't inclined to do something on her behalf, did he just find her to be getting too out of control to be with her? I don't know. Unless it was her decision.
Did she say he was a
Professor of social work.
professor? Okay, so
He's licensed.
FSU or?
Yes, FSU, College of Social Work professor. He looked a little bit like Danny, I suppose, looked when he was younger.
Okay. You met him?
I did not meet him.
You saw his picture?
I saw his picture. Mm-hmm. And
Is this the only guy in her life?
So, good question. When Danny and I were at Thai food that night for my birthday, Ken Lawson, who's the secretary of DDPR, he happened to be there and he said hello, and Dan said hello, and I'm fairly certain that Ken and Wendy dated right around the divorce or around the time she left or something around there. But that was just in passing. She's been very close to the vest. And I didn't know she was dating anyone. I mean, I heard from Danny, but then I didn't know from her that that was the case. And I don't think he knew from her. I think he knew from other people telling him. So that was kind of odd. And even if they had just broken up and things were good, I would still be over helping to comfort her yesterday. That's a big deal, especially with a social work background. Janine, according to her husband, I guess, he wasn't there, but Janine was with Wendy when she found him. Janine's like, I went to the police station with her, but it felt I was like, is she an attorney? Is she representing her? It felt very guarded, very, very guarded. Are you her personal bodyguard now? And almost guarded with the children around me. And I'm like, that's really weird. Again, Wendy's mom seemed fine. Anyone else, I can't say.
You don't suspect anything suspicious about her mom?
Not so much, no.
But her dad, you're feeling some vibes because of him not wanting to look you in the eye yesterday.
And then today not wanting to look me at all. No.
Did he acknowledge you at all today?
No, he didn't. Not at all. And he and his son had a dental practice. He was well respected in the community down in South Florida, which has a lot of resources, and I'm sure that if anything were to take place, they would be extremely smart about it. But I got a vibe from him I know you suspect me, and I'm done.
Okay.
I don't know.
You said that woman that was over there was Janine?
Janine? Mm-hmm.
You know her last name or anything?
Nope. Supposedly she was with Wendy when Wendy was being interrogated. Or at the police station with Wendy at the time she was being questioned.
Okay.
And then Janine's husband. But she was protective in a way that felt a little overprotective.
That was the first time you met her?
Yes.
Okay.
and
Never heard of her before?
mm-mm.
What do you know about her two brothers? I know there's two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard about this Charlie, and he's a periodontist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who worked with her dad, and that's in South Florida. And then her older brother, whose name is escaping me right now, I believe was in New York, doctor married to an Indian descent woman named Harutha. And protective of her, but very kind of separated and involved with his own life and his family. Charlie was the one who was closer.
Charlie's older than her as well?
Charlie's the younger one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, no. I guess Wendy is the youngest. It's just that Charlie's younger than I am too,
Okay.
so. But I was down there in their house. I was trying to help her learn how to breastfeed with Danny there and the brother. And when they split up, I went down and met with Wendy and went out with Wendy and Charlie and his friends. It's mind-blowing, but the legal situation was getting to another point where it was blowing up.
He somehow found out that she withheld financial disclosure
Yes,
and was going to use that
yes.
for what purpose?
It was to discredit her and have things adjusted, I believe, including getting back his heirloom.
Okay, he told you this.
Yes.
Okay, and he told you the figure of
$500,000 is what he
Danny
said.
told you that directly?
Yes.
So in other words, when they were going through their divorce proceedings and they each had to file disclosure statements,
Correct.
she shorted it by $500,000.
He said she fraudulently did it, yes.
And he didn't bring it up then. Or he didn't know about it then.
He didn't know about it then.
But he's discovered it since.
Yes.
And so,
And he talked about it even before we went to dinner on my birthday.
did he talk about it to anybody else that you know of?
I'm sure he talked about it to Alex and Maya. Now, he also talks about stuff, I'm sure, to his parents, because when I met Ruth, Ruth was trying to talk to Donna Adelson, Wendy's mom, and saying like, oh, I really like to see the boys. And like Donna just kept walking away.
Who was saying that?
Ruth
Right.
said to Wendy's mom, Donna,
Today.
today at the service, I'd really like to see the boys. And Donna kept walking away with the boys. And Ruth turned to me and she said, I hope what I just saw didn't actually happen. Like, she just got ignored.
Oh.
And she said that, she's like, well, I guess that's not gonna happen, but you know the story. So obviously, I infer that Dan had been talking to her and the family about these problems. It was a big family to family. But Danny talked to him about everything. Like they were like brother and sister to him while he was here.
Okay.
And he needed that kind of rock. He was a mess with what Wendy put him through. And I'll tell you that Maya, on some level, suspects that Wendy's family might be involved. Alex is really trying not to think that way. Let me pull up Dan's messages. Let me see if there's the list of attorneys. That's what I wanted to go through. He says, I hope you're not using Wendy's lawyer. I said, who does she have? Currently, Kristen Adamson. Sorry, Kristen Adamson. I'll just let you see it.
This was her attorney. That's what she's talking about. Before was Shannon Novi.
This is Danny writing to me.
Okay.
Because I was in the process of trying to find an attorney, which I didn't end up using with my ex.
Okay.
But the way that this went was every so often, each of them would change lawyers. And what that would do was conflict out the attorney for the other person.
Not sure how that works, but okay. You're the law grad.
Basically, if they've ever talked to you about your case,
Right.
you can't represent the other person.
Okay.
So they went around and get consultations and had each person for a little while. If they didn't like how the attorney was handling it, they'd attorney shop.
And the other one couldn't use the one they just got through
Correct.
with.
And there are only a certain number of family certified attorneys in town.
Okay.
It got ugly. I mean, it was a long list of, and he was actively filing motions to conflict out people she was selecting as of when we went to dinner on June 4th.
So it sounds like they're both trying to eliminate all the possible attorneys that the other side can have.
Correct. It was honestly, it was just ugly.
Okay.
And for a while it became ugly in a really like a Cold War sort of way. And then in the last month and a half, it had started heating up again. Originally, she had asked me, I did the guest lecture June 17th. Originally, she had sent me an email asking me to guest lecture on June 3rd, which was my birthday, so I remember it. Because she wanted me to guest lecture on the dates she and Danny were supposed to go into court. And then that got moved. So they were going back and forth that whole time.
Up until this past June?
This was this June.
Yeah, I know. I'm
Yeah.
saying, what were they going to go to court for on June 3rd?
They were going to court again for this. He was trying to raise those issues, those particular issues.
Had he notified, had he already filed this motion? Had he already?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know that they were going to court and then he wanted to adjust it to add certain things on
Okay.
for conflict and for this failure to disclose
Okay.
aspect.
And she was notified of that?
I assume so. And she, when she used to trust me and talk to me about her legal stuff, and then she felt like I was getting too close to Danny, she, her parents were goading her on, like, you need to go to the mattresses, you need to get, and they wanted to be done with him and really stick it to him. There was a mentality when she would talk to me and when I was present with them when they would talk, that he owed her.
Okay.
And he owed her big time, which they weren't married a whole lot of years, but there was this, he owes you. That was, and I don't know whether it was because she had told them she felt she had been abused or what, but that was incredibly present. And the people that she talked to on Team Wendy had heard stories that Danny was very upset about, and he spent time trying to change that. So it got personal, it got professional, it was unpleasant.
Did Danny ever concede that he owed her more money?
No, he felt like he owed her less money. I mean, he would do anything for the boys. He would give everything for the boys. But in terms of her taking something that she wasn't owed, he was not.
No, I know, but I'd heard something before about that there was some contention in this divorce that he had not paid for everything.
And that was the case, I think, earlier on, to my knowledge.
I don't know if it was equity of the house or...
Yeah, they disagreed on house. Yeah, that sounds right. They disagreed on that. They disagreed on the jewelry, the heirloom. And then in going through this process, it was the concealment of the $500,000 in assets. And I didn't understand the details of what that entailed, if that was like inheritance money. I think she thought it was inheritance money that he wasn't entitled to. But it was a back and forth of, you just didn't do this, you didn't disclose that, you should have done this, and it was, she felt trapped. I know she felt trapped here. And I know that he, especially now dating someone in New York, was like, he wanted things to move on. I mean, he wanted, even before he started dating Amy, when he was talking to me, he wanted to move on.
Tallahassee, I think a lot of Tallahassee, this is my home, but
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are of the opinion, well, Tallahassee's not Miami, it's not Orlando, it's definitely not New York, it's not Boston. So a guy, I mean, I just wondered, I never quite understood why they landed here from everything I've heard.
So he wanted to be a full-time professor, and he had some friends here who lived here before me and had talked to them as well. And so FSU became the option. And they had lived in DC together before they came down here, and seemed to have a nice romance, seemed like a nice couple. And they moved here, and she was miserable here. They moved here, and she was miserable here, even before the wedding. And he wanted to set up roots. He wanted to have a kind of a, he's Canadian and all the things, but he wanted like a Burby family, go to shul, and he could establish himself. And this provided enough of a small town feel that he's like, I'm gonna throw myself into it. And he was happy to do that. He wanted the house, when they got the house together, he wanted to do it all up, and he was excited about that. And she went along, but I knew she wasn't excited about it.
Well, why Tallahassee as opposed to someplace down in South Florida where she's from?
That's not a place where he could get a professorship immediately.
Okay.
It's bigger competition.
Okay.
And I don't think he was as keen on Miami. In fact, after she left him, he's like, I'll even move down to Miami with you, kind of thing. She wouldn't have. But I was too late at that point. But he didn't want to go down to Miami. She always felt they would end up in Miami. I think they lived in Miami. Yeah, they did. They lived in Miami she lived in Miami while she was finishing school for a year. So they were down in Miami for a little bit together. I actually went and visited them in Miami.
Oh, they were married?
I don't even think they were married yet. I'm not sure. It was either just before or shortly after they got married that they were down in Miami. When I was still married and I lived in Brandon, they came when they were engaged and stayed at my house for a couple of nights. So her life was South Florida. She grew up there, wanted to be back there, especially when the kids came. She wanted to be close to her parents. It was a little overwhelming for her, especially with two boys. And he was, hey, we're here, and let's go into the community and really become a part of it. And so he was trying to help her get a teaching position at FSU. And so she started as an adjunct, and she was teaching the medical, legal, clinical. Marshall Kapp, she was the person she reported to. He was at the service today. And she started bringing me in to guest lecture, and I've done it every semester for the last 3 years, including her summers. So I always have touched base with her, but it's once a semester, once every 3 or 4 months, and Danny, it's, at least every month I'm hanging out with him at some point.
Okay. All right. So basically, from our conversation,
I don't feel good about her dad.
right. Anybody else in the family besides him?
I haven't seen Charlie in a really long time, but I know that she was relying heavily on Charlie, and if she was telling anyone about what happened or what she felt happened, it would have been Charlie.
Okay.
And that he was very protective of her. Danny felt like he was okay with Charlie at the beginning, and then over time he felt like he wasn't anymore. And I think the same thing. He felt like he was fine with her parents, and then all of a sudden they flipped on him. He was very confused about it. And I think over time, when he was hearing some of the things that she had passed along to colleagues, who then started looking at him funny, he realized that her family members may be thinking the same things. And I don't know exactly what she was telling them, but he was painted as not a nice person.
Okay.
So it became very he said, she said. Now, I do believe they both love those children to death. But I've never seen a father so devoted. And she became very happy to travel, and she'd be gone for just periods at a time and leave the boys. I don't know who she left them with, if her parents came up for what, but she would just leave. And it really bothered him too, because when she did that, sometimes he wouldn't get the boys, or it was like a day off, and so she was like, oh, well, they'll just stay with this person this time. And so there were little takes where she kept trying to cut into his time schedule. But they had a little bit of a groove for a while, where it seemed like it was going okay. And then just in the last few months, it has felt like a renewed flurry of legal activity. And she seemed happy and excited about the social worker boyfriend. And Dan thought maybe she would calm down and be happy and start her own path. And he had recently gone up to visit her. So after we went to dinner, he was leaving to go visit her, and they had this pattern where they switch off every couple of weeks. Mostly he would fly up because she had some flying issues and was a little bit timid about flying. So he would go up, and she was scheduled to come down and meet the boys in person for the first time, which recently just happened. So he was all excited about that, and she had started Skyping with the boys. My understanding was that Wendy had found out that she was Skyping with the boys and was furious about it. And this is very recently.
I didn't know that.
So Amy had started coming more into the boys' lives, and I don't think she was handling it well from what I've heard. No, I don't.
She was Skyping from here. Danny was having the boys on Skype here while he had them.
I don't know. I think he may have tried to put her on while he was with her.
Oh.
While the boys were with Wendy. That's my understanding.
Oh, okay.
Which upset her.
Okay.
Which would make more sense if she were present. When I walked into Wendy's yesterday, and I'm assessing the situation, and Janine was there, and they went into a private conversation, and I'm sitting down, and they're like, well, does Amy, we'd have to talk to Amy, and and I said, I talked to Amy, and I said, does she know? I said, yeah, she knows. And they're like, no, not what happened. Does she know? As if, does she know where the investigators are looking, was the implication. And I said, what do you mean? And the next question was Wendy redirected, and she said, has she talked to her husband? And so she started down this path with Janine there of making me wonder, or wanting to make me wonder if Amy's husband was involved. I still didn't feel led that way, even with that discussion change. But that was the path. Wendy is good at keeping things close to the vest and redirecting. And for example, she and I were pretty close while she was writing that book. She didn't tell me she was writing the book at all. And then when she finally told me, she gave me a copy, and it was like, oh, author lives in Tallahassee with her 2 sons.
Now, was this a book about a single woman raising 2 children?
Yeah. This is our story. It was about It was a fictionalized version of human trafficking based on her clinical work.
Okay.
And it's apparently hit. It was selected at FSU to be their, it was like their one book or something campus. So everyone who joined, every new freshman gets a copy of her book. I was told that up at UNC, or up at Duke, there's a copy of her book in the law library up at Duke. She was one of the few people that she self-published, and then after she self-published, because she was so good at publicizing it, people came back and wanted to formally publish it for her, which is rare. And Dan was all like supportive about everything and all this kind of stuff, and it's still, honestly, when I looked at that, I'm like, it was one of the things I noted, but I put in the back of my mind with every other little weird thing. And then when she left him, I was like, oh, she knew this was coming. But she when she finished, it was like a whole year.
Hey, Sarah. Good. Yes, I'm with her now. Well, she was going to help them look for that, but that's just not that I know of. Well, actually, we're just about done here, and she can go back by the house if that's what she wants to.
Yes, please.
So, they were what? Okay. All right, I'll let her know. Uh-huh. Bye. Apparently it sounds like they're having some type of difficulty finding this will or possibility of a will, or I don't know that if they even know for sure.
I just know that at some point we talked about him having one.
Yeah.
I don't know where in the timeline it is at all.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so she wrote this book. It's going to come out this fall? Or...
No, it came out.
Okay.
I don't remember when it came out. I can probably go through notes and figure out. But the timeline for when she left him, she had published it many months before she left, and that's how she put it in the book.
Okay.
So she had been planning it for a long time.
Because there was no acknowledgement of him as her husband.
Acknowledgement of him.
Even though they were still married at the
Correct.
time. Okay. All right. Okay, and they were still living together at that
Correct.
time? Okay.
Yep. And she told me later that, she had been thinking about it for a long time, but she had really been thinking about it for a long time. Like, it was a deftly executed plan of, he's gone this weekend, everything out. And the book, having been written so far in advance, was just strange to not include him when he also teaches there, and they were living in the same house and supposedly happily married. So I tried to think maybe that does give some credence to her really wanting to get out because of certain reasons. But Danny can be crass, and I can see how he can come across as condescending. He was just a typical condescending Harvard nerdy type person when I first met him. Like, bow tie wearing, and he would rub people the wrong way because he was very, very highfalutin, used big words. He was very confident in his intelligence, but it came across as arrogant.
Okay.
He came across as arrogant to many people. Over time, he mellowed, especially after Wendy and especially with the boys. He mellowed. He's like, okay, everything doesn't have to be so put in place and nothing's so perfect, and he just matured. And he went to wearing sandals every day and kind of like slobbing it around. I'm like, oh, this is interesting, this phase. But he just became more comfortable in his own skin in Tallahassee, and he, especially hearing it now, like, he was able to make a lot of friends. if he rubbed people the wrong way or he seemed arrogant, people were eventually won over by his kind of, self-deprecating at times, but wise, silly sarcasm. And he was very silly. In his professional life, so he started Prof's blog. He was doing this website called Prof's blog. He was very active. He had gathered academics from across the United States, and they were all working on this blog that he had, but he was the main person doing it, and it really took off. I mean, I think it was ranked on some list in the last year, like really high.
Was this for law professors?
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's spelled PRAWFS blog, Prof's blog. And he was happy. I mean, he thought he was happy with Wendy, and then after he left, he was miserable. After she left, he was miserable, and then he was finally getting back. He was getting back, and I think all he wanted is for his children to grow up in that legacy. And all of his close friends know that at the first chance she gets, she'll be in South Florida. There will not be any Jewish upbringing. His friends are freaking out about this right now. And that pretty much any wish that he had for them would be just completely out the door. But they were having a very difficult time balancing their wishes.
Doing what?
Balancing their wishes.
Okay.
Because they were so opposite of each other.
Right.
It was the type of thing where the sentiment was, it would not end.
Okay.
And for Wendy to have acted on multiple occasions, including the time she left, in a very long-term, very secretive planning mode, and then a very almost shockingly sudden execution, it just makes me wonder. And I don't know if that's a family trait, but I know that everyone, family, friends, everyone was tired of having different teams, tired of this legal back and forth. And if people felt it wasn't going to end, I could see them wanting to make it end.
Okay. And like you said, this opens up all her options as to where she goes from here.
Yeah. And I care about her, and I've been friends with her, but it's through Danny that I first met her, and I've been friends with him for a decade before that. And it was because of her that my loyalty was, I can't date you right now either. So it's like I've tried to respect that. I've tried to respect where everyone is. But I'm already devastated. I'm kind of in the numb zone right now. But he was my confidant. He was my advisor. He was someone who I could trust. And that, for me, was very rare. So, I don't know what I'm going to be doing without him here. Maybe get out of Tallahassee.
You worried for your own safety?
I was worried, like, if...
Didn't you? You worried for your own safety?
I was worried, like, if someone is so rational that they would do something like this, or put out a hit, or plan this, or whatever like this, or put out a hit, or plan this, or whatever like this, or put out a hit, or plan this, or whatever, and they feel like someone really suspicious about it, that person, why not? You know? If there's some kind of chink in the plan, there's... And I know Ruth is trying so hard to be gracious because she wants that relationship with those boys. But it would break Danny's heart if it turns out the way that it's seemingly going to now. Where they're in Canada, she'll never let them go see. There's no grandparent rights, right, in Florida? They'll never be raised in that. And I guess that's her right if there's nothing to do with this. But I pray that there's nothing, she and her family had nothing to do with that, because those boys need everyone. But there are so many good reasons for him not to be around. And I'm just angry thinking about it. Just even the possibility, I'm furious about it. And when I grieve, it takes me years to actually get angry. So for me to get angry like on day one was very unusual. And if they'd had nothing to do with it, she put him through hell for the last year and a half. And everyone knows that. So there are different people, but I didn't even want to call her. I also found it strange that she didn't call me. She knew how close I was to him. I just guest lectured for her. She and I are friends. She didn't reach out to me, contact me, anything. I didn't even want to look at her Facebook page or call her. I'm like, she didn't reach out. This is just weird. And that's why I just showed up.
Oh, you talking about today?
Yesterday.
Yesterday? Oh, at the house.
Mm-hmm.
Then you showed up unannounced.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's saying I'm sorry when she greeted you, you're associating that with I'm sorry I didn't call you. I'm sorry I didn't notify you.
No, that was an I'm sorry for your loss, because she knew how close I was to him. No, I found it strange that in the period where she learned something had happened to him and didn't know he had died, because apparently that hadn't happened yet. She didn't call me, nothing. She knows I'm his oldest and closest friend here. Didn't call, nothing. Like, that just didn't feel right either. At some point, whether waiting, being questioned, worrying, something, it would have made complete logical sense, just seeing her a couple weeks ago, that she would have contacted me.
Gotcha.
So, I don't know. So.
I know they're waiting for you up there.
What can you tell me now?
Well, I want to, I know that they were telling you about the injuries that he sustained. They were not that severe. I mean, it caused death, but it was not that as severe and as traumatic as what they were portraying. But that's not unusual for that to occur. I know that there was different theories and people thought there was some type of maniac running loose in the neighborhood. It appears that however this occurred, that he was targeted directly. I don't see anything that indicates someone was in the process of doing another crime and he interrupted them or anything like that. So basically you pretty much already have it, is that unless there's a case of mistaken identity, and I know that there's some other people at the law school with the same last name, that it looks like someone came after Danny personally. As to why or what the motivation, that's still open. But I'm thinking anybody that would do something like this would probably know the right person. It wouldn't be a case of mistaken identity. It's possible, especially when you have 2 or 3 professors down there with the same pronunciation and similar spelling of the name. Now, as far as this thing he was consulting on, I understand that's just been within the past couple weeks. The case that's up north is still going on, and he seems so far removed from that.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
And in addition, he was consulting for the defense. It's not like he was consulting for some type of expert witness for the prosecution.
And he was all about justice and being fair to defendants, especially. That was his work. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Was it at the door or was it in his car?
His car.
Okay, that was what I had heard on a more personal level. That there was a huge mistaken sense that he was on the phone, answered the door, and was shot in the face.
I know that's out there, and I'm not going to correct that.
I understand.
And I don't want you to repeat that.
I won't. I won't.
And I know that that's why the whole neighborhood is all up in arms, because nobody's going to want to answer their door now.
I know.
But when you go back to the home, more than likely you're going to understand, because that was the concern of the parents about blood in the house and so on and so forth. And I assured them that there wasn't. And then this morning I explained to them why there wouldn't be blood in the house.
I had heard originally it was the driveway, and that's why when I drove past yesterday and just sat there, it also bothered me that I was like, shouldn't there be some sign of him? Shouldn't there be something?
It's inside the garage. You're going to understand. It's going to make more sense when you get back to the house.
Okay.
Because they're not going to, and I don't have a problem if they tell you. They may play dumb or they may act like, they're not supposed to tell you or whatever, but you can tell them that I've already talked to you and so forth.
And is it believed that it was a lie-in-wait situation?
I don't know about that. I don't know if it was a lie-in-wait or they followed him or...
Was it an open garage door?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. So both my babysitter and a friend down the street, they all live in Benton, had had their cars broken into over the last several months. It's always been in the evening, though. It's always been for people who just happen to have not locked their door that day.
That's correct.
And no one's ever gotten hurt, to my knowledge. Doesn't fit that either.
No.
It would be an interesting thing if someone knew that was going on, because it was such a long period of time that it occurred, that someone might think, oh, this might be a good thing to imply. But again, that crossed my mind, like, still doesn't fit. So.
No, I don't think it's related to anything like that. Those are crimes of opportunity. Somebody comes by, flips the door handles. Actually, I had a conversation with a couple of ladies at the memorial service, and they were asking about that stuff, and I told them, I said, 9 times out of 10 people aren't locking their doors. Even this day and age. It's in their front yard, it's in their driveway, they don't lock it.
Is it believed that he saw coming?
He may have, it's not clear yet, but he may have known that something was, he wouldn't have known till, it was basically, he wouldn't know until it was too late.
But it was instantaneous. He
Yeah,
lost consciousness instantly. He lost consciousness instantly.
Oh, absolutely.
So he probably didn't feel it.
I don't believe he suffered.
Okay.
You don't have to go back to the house if you don't feel like it.
Oh, I want to.
Okay.
I want
Let
to.
me be right, I'll be right back, okay?
Okay. Oh, God.
Okay, everyone, so that was the completed video about Tamara's police interview that we covered today, and it was really interesting to hear, the perspective of someone on the inside who really got to see the raw messiness of Dan Markel and Wendy Adelson's divorce. So definitely very interesting. I enjoyed watching that, and I hope you guys did as well. Thank you so much for joining me. This was episode 4 of Watch with Maya, and I'll publish an edited version soon, or maybe just that same video. We'll fix the audio. There was just a couple issues with it that we can republish as well. But thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you guys join me next time on our next live stream, episode 5. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.